Early 1973. Lou Reed sat in his small New York apartment, reading reviews of Transformer. Everyone was praising it. Pop masterpiece, commercial genius, Bowie's latest triumph. That last phrase stuck in Reed's gut. Bowie's triumph. But what about Lou Reed? Was he just Bowie's project? A writer crushed under glossy pop production? Reed looked in the mirror and saw someone he didn't recognize. Colorful clothes, styled hair, pop star image. None of this was the real Lou. The real Lou was dark, from the streets, underground. That's why he'd founded the Velvet Underground, to tell clean, naked, brutal truth. But Transformer had polished that truth, packaged it, made it sellable. Reed picked up the phone and called Bob Ezrin. "I want to make an album, but it's going to be the opposite of Transformer. Dark, depressing, an album nobody will want to hear. Will you do it?" Ezrin agreed, and Berlin was born. Don't forget to subscribe, because we're going to tell you the story of Lou Reed's battle to reclaim his artistic identity. Our story begins during Transformer's climb to the top. December 1972. Walk on the Wild Side was spinning on the radio. The album was climbing the charts, and Lou Reed was tasting real commercial success for the first time in his life. But this success had a strange taste. In every interview, journalists asked the same questions. What was it like working with David Bowie? But could you have achieved this success without Bowie's production? Will you work with Bowie on the next album? Lou Reed answered patiently, but inside he was burning, because the songs were his, the lyrics were his, the stories were his. Every word on Transformer came from Lou's life, his pain, his observations, but the world saw it as Bowie's success. In January 1973, Rolling Stone ran a cover story. The headline read, "David Bowie's Midas Touch, How He Turned Lou Reed into Gold." When Reed picked up that magazine, he stared at the cover for a long time. His photo was there, but the headline was talking about Bowie. The article inside was even worse. While praising Transformer, the critic constantly mentioned Bowie's vision, Mick Ronson's arrangements, the brilliance of glam rock production. Lou Reed's songwriting was almost a footnote. That night, Reed stood at his window for a long time, looking at Manhattan's lights. 10 years ago, he'd founded the Velvet Underground in this city. He'd merged art and music at Andy Warhol's factory. He'd written songs about heroin, transsexuals, the streets, and nobody had bought them, but everyone had praised the artistic integrity. Now everyone was buying his album, but he'd lost his artistic integrity. Transformer was successful because it had packaged Lou Reed, softened him, made him mainstream. Bowie was a brilliant producer, but he was also a filter. He'd taken Lou's naked, brutal reality and turned it into shiny pop candy. And now everyone was licking that candy without seeing the truth underneath. Reed decided that night, never again would he be anyone's filter. The next album would be entirely his, naked, brutal, unsellable. February 1973. A meeting was held at RCA Records' New York office. At the table sat Lou Reed, his manager Dennis Katz, and RCA executives. The agenda was clear: plans for the second album. Transformer's success had excited the company, and they immediately wanted a follow-up. An executive spoke. "Lou, are you thinking about going back to London with David? Same studio, same team, same formula. This time it could be even bigger." Reed listened quietly, then he shook his head. "No, I won't work with David." Silence fell over the room. Dennis Katz jumped in. "Lou, maybe you should reconsider this. Transformer was an incredible success. Why change?" Reed answered in a calm but determined voice. "Because Transformer wasn't mine. It was my songs, but it wasn't my album. The next album will be completely mine." The RCA executive asked anxiously, "So who's going to produce?" Reed answered, "Bob Ezrin. I want to work with him." This name surprised everyone at the table. Bob Ezrin was Alice Cooper's producer, making dark, theatrical, shocking music, the complete opposite of Bowie's bright pop aesthetic. After the meeting, Dennis Katz pulled Lou aside and asked, "Lou, do you really want to do this? Bowie gave you a second chance. Rejecting him is risky." Reed looked into his eyes and said, "Dennis, 9 months ago I was dying. David saved me, and I'll be grateful to him forever. But now I need to stand on my own feet. If I always stay in David's shadow, I'll never be the real Lou Reed." Dennis nodded but was worried, because he knew the path Lou Reed was choosing was much harder. The news didn't take long to reach London. David Bowie was working on a new project in the studio when his assistant handed him the phone. "David, RCA's calling. It's about Lou." Bowie took the phone and listened. His expression slowly changed. When he hung up, Mick Ronson looked at him and asked, "Is there a problem?" Bowie quietly replied, "Lou doesn't want me. He's working with Bob Ezrin." Ronson was surprised. Why? Wasn't Transformer perfect? Bowie shrugged, but there was hurt in his eyes. "I guess it was too perfect. Lou wants to go his own way." March 1973, at Morgan Studios in North London, Lou Reed and Bob Ezrin met for the first time. Ezrin was young, energetic, visionary. His albums with Alice Cooper were theatrical, shocking, boundary-pushing, exactly what Lou was looking for. In their first meeting, Reed explained the concept to Ezrin. "I want to tell a story set in Berlin, a dark love story. Drug addiction, violence, suicide, children. No happy ending, no hope, just pain." Ezrin listened and his eyes lit up. "Lou, this is the bravest concept I've ever heard. Nobody's made an album like this. But I should warn you, this could be commercial suicide. After Transformer, people expect you to make pop songs." Reed smiled. It was a bitter smile. "Good. Let them be disappointed. I wasn't born to be a pop star. I'm a storyteller, and I need to tell this story." Ezrin nodded. "Then let's do it. But it's going to be really dark. It'll disturb listeners. It won't play on the radio. Critics might tear it apart." Reed answered, "I don't care. Art isn't about comfort. It's about showing truth." When recording began, Reed was a completely different man. During the Transformer sessions, Bowie and Ronson had guided him. Arrangements were prepared in advance. The sound had to be brighter and poppier. But at Morgan Studios, Lou was completely in control. He brought the songs, Lady Day, Men of Good Fortune, Caroline Says, The Kids, Sad Song. Each one a separate tragedy, a separate story of pain. The album's central character was a woman named Caroline, beaten by her lover, addicted to drugs, eventually losing her children and driven to suicide. Reed had created this character from real life, inspired by women he'd known during the factory days. Ezrin didn't soften anything in production. On the contrary, he emphasized every pain, every scream, every dark moment. In The Kids, he used real children crying sounds. Reed had wanted this to create maximum emotional impact. At the end of the song, as children cried, "Mummy, Mummy," it dramatized the moment Caroline lost her children. This was an almost unbearable song to listen to. When RCA executives first heard it, they were uncomfortable. "This won't play on the radio," they said. Reed coldly replied, "I didn't make it to play on the radio." While recording continued, David Bowie in London was trying to focus on his own projects. But gossip about what Lou was doing reached his ears. One day an old studio assistant told Bowie, "David, have you heard Lou's new album? It's really dark, the complete opposite of your Transformer production." Bowie acted cold. Lou's choice. Everyone chooses their own path. But inside he was hurt. 9 months ago he'd risked his career for Lou, threatened RCA, created Transformer, and now Lou was leaving him without even a thank you, going in the complete opposite direction. In April 1973, when Bowie was asked about Lou in an interview, he gave a diplomatic answer. "Lou's a great artist. He should follow his own vision. I just helped him on Transformer, that's all." But the journalist insisted, "What do you think about his new album?" Bowie paused and said, "I haven't heard it yet, but I'm sure it's what Lou wants to do." This answer was diplomatic, but underneath was a crack, because in reality, Bowie had taken Lou's rejection of him as a personal rejection. The friendship between the two men had its first crack. In May, Reed finished the Berlin recordings, 11 songs total, 60 minutes of dark, depressing, painful music. When Ezrin listened to the final mix, he said, "Lou, this is the most powerful album I've ever made, but also the most unsellable. Be prepared." Reed seemed relaxed. "Bob, I've been making albums that don't sell for 10 years. The Velvet Underground never sold. But now, 30 years later, everyone talks about its influence. Berlin will be the same. Maybe it won't be understood now, but its value will be understood in time. July 1973. When the Berlin album was released, the music world was shocked. But this wasn't Transformers' positive shock. This was an uncomfortable, mixed shock. When the first reviews started coming in, Reed's worst fears came true. Rolling Stone magazine ripped the album apart. Unbearably depressing to listen to. Hard to understand why Reed wants to make his fans suffer this much. NME was even more brutal. After Transformer, we expected pop songs from Reed. Instead, he gave us this dark, self-pitying album. Disappointing. But some critics saw the album's courage. Lester Bangs, one of rock criticism's most respected names, wrote a long piece. Berlin is disturbing because it's real. Reed isn't telling us lies here, isn't hiding truth with pretty pop melodies. He's showing us life's ugly, painful, unbearable face. That takes courage, and Lou Reed has that courage. But Bang's defense wasn't enough. The general atmosphere was negative. Sales were disastrous. Transformer had sold over 1 million. Berlin sold only 50,000 copies in its first week. The second week dropped even more. RCA Records panicked. Executives called Lou and asked, "Why did you make an album like this? You could have made a Transformer sequel." Reed coldly replied, "Because I'm not a jukebox. I don't do the same thing on every album." RCA continued to pressure. "At least release a single, something radio can play." Reed refused. "There are no singles on Berlin. It's a concept album. It should be listened to as a whole." In August, Lou Reed held a small press conference. The journalists were aggressive, questions sharp and critical. One journalist asked, "Lou, why did you risk your career after Transformer's success?" Reed answered, "Transformer wasn't my career. It was David's production. Berlin is my career. And yes, it's risky, but art isn't safe." Another journalist asked, "How are things with David Bowie? Did you reject him?" Reed paused and answered carefully, "I have endless respect for David. He helped me a lot, but I had to find my own way. Not everyone understands that." September 1973. David Bowie and Lou Reed met at an awards ceremony in London. The two men came face to face for the first time in months. They shook hands and smiled as etiquette required, but the atmosphere was tense. Bowie politely asked, "I listened to Berlin. Very brave." Reed tried to read his tone. "Thanks. What did you think?" Bowie paused and answered with carefully chosen words, "Very dark, very personal, but I guess that's what you wanted." Reed nodded. "Yes, Transformer was a great album, but it was yours. Berlin is mine." That night they both went to separate parties. But the next day this headline appeared in the press. Bowie and Reed Cold War, tension between two geniuses. The article said the two men had been distant during the ceremony, that Bowie hadn't openly criticized Berlin, but hadn't praised it either. This news strained their relationship further, because now everyone was talking about the crack between them. In an October interview, Reed spoke openly. "Some people, when they save other people, they try to control them. I'm not under anyone's control. David helped me, yes, but that doesn't mean I'm his property." When these words reached Bowie, they caused disappointment, because Bowie had never tried to control Lou. He'd only tried to help, but Lou hadn't perceived it that way. For Lou, Transformer's success was also a feeling of imprisonment, being crushed inside a shiny pop package. By the end of 1973, Berlin was branded a completely failed album. Lou Reed was at the lowest point of his career. Concert tickets weren't selling, radio wouldn't play it, RCA Records had cooled on him, but Reed had no regrets. In an interview he said, "With Berlin I proved something. I can stand on my own. I can make music without Transformer." Did it fail? Yes. But at least the failure is mine. As years passed, Berlin's perception began to change. In the 1980s, a new generation of musicians discovered the album and started praising it. Joy Division, The Cure, Sonic Youth, all spoke of Berlin's influence. In the 1990s, critics re-evaluated and called the album a misunderstood masterpiece. In 2006, Lou Reed went on a concert tour where he'd play the Berlin album entirely live, and this time audiences were ready. Concerts sold out, critics applauded. Berlin had finally received the respect it deserved, just 33 years late. David Bowie and Lou Reed's relationship was never the same again. Throughout the 1970s, their distance increased. They rarely spoke, rarely appeared at the same events, but in the 1980s there was a softening. Bowie finally understood Reed's artistic courage and said in an interview, "Lou did something very brave with Berlin. I didn't understand it at the time, but now I do." He was searching for his own truth and found it. Reed also didn't forget his gratitude to Bowie. In a 1990s interview he confessed, "David saved me in 1972. I rejected him with Berlin, but that doesn't erase what he did. I owe him forever." Berlin's story isn't just the story of a failed album, it's also a deep lesson about artistic integrity. With Transformer, Lou Reed had tasted commercial success but lost himself. With Berlin he found himself but lost commerce. Which was more valuable? Reed's answer was clear: artistic integrity. Because money is temporary, fame comes and goes, but art is permanent. Berlin failed in 1973, but today is remembered as one of rock history's important albums. Transformer was more commercially successful, but Berlin was more artistically honest. This story shows us that sometimes success is a trap. Transformer saved Lou Reed, but also tried to imprison him. Lou was getting lost inside shiny pop packaging. Berlin was him tearing through that packaging. Ugly, naked, but real, and truth always wins, with time. Critics tore Berlin apart in 1973, but called it a masterpiece in the 2000s. Because truth gains value over time, while lies fade. The story of David Bowie and Lou Reed is a clash of two different artistic philosophies. Bowie was a master at balancing commercial success and art. Let's Dance proved that. But Lou Reed could never wanted to strike that balance. He was always at extremes, either completely underground or completely honest. Berlin was his honesty manifesto, and this honesty demanded a price: friendship crack, commercial failure, critical attack. But Reed was ready to pay it, because he knew that art isn't negotiation, it's sacrifice. When you listen to Berlin today, you're hearing the sound of rebellion. Rebellion against Bowie's shiny world, against the industry's expectations, against the temptation of easy success, and perhaps most importantly, rebellion against his own past success. With Transformer, Lou Reed had forgotten who he was. With Berlin, he remembered who he was, and that remembering was painful, difficult, isolating, but it was necessary, because being an artist sometimes means losing yourself, then painfully finding yourself again.